Hello, welcome to the HTB, also known as the Harlem Television Broadcast. I am John Madden, your lead anchor, and to my left is Carlton Banks.
Hello, Harlem, and more importantly, hello, America.
Thank you for that, Carlton. Moving on to something more important. Our main story is about a very keen and a ritzy writer and poet. Of course, I'm talking about the hot tossy Langston Hughes. After doing much research, I have finally finished my report. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore? And then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over it, like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? That was Dream Deferred by Langston Hughes. On to my report. Langston Hughes is a poet, novelist, playwright, autobiographer, and writer of children's books. Born in 1902 in Joplin, Missouri, Langston grew up mainly in Lawrence, Kansas, but he also lived in Illinois, Ohio, and Mexico. By the time Hughes enrolled at Columbia University, he had already launched his literary career with his poem, The Negro Speaks Rivers. And in this crisis, edited by Webb Dubious, he also committed himself both to writing and to writing mainly about African Americans. Hughes' sense of dedication was instilled in him most of all by his maternal grandmother, Mary Langston, whose first husband had died at Harper's Ferry as a member of the John Brown band, whose second husband, Hughes' grandfather, had also been a militant abolitionist. Another important family figure was John Mercer Langston, a brother of Hughes' grandfather, who was best known of the Black Americans of the 19th century. At the same time, Hughes struggled with a sense of desolation fostered by parental neglect. He himself recalled being driven early by his loneliness to books and the wonderful world in books. Leaving Columbia in 1922, Hughes spent the next 3 years in a succession of menial jobs, but he also traveled abroad. He worked on a ferry down the west coast of Africa, lived several months in Paris before returning to the United States late in 1924. By this time, he was well known in African American literacy circles as a gifted young poet. His major early influences were Walt Whitman, Carl Sandburg, as well as the black poets Paul Laurence Dunbar, a master of both dialect, standard verse, and Claude Mackay, a radical socialist who wrote accomplished lyrical poetry. However, Sandburg, who Hughes later called my guiding star, was decisive in leading him towards free verse and a radically democratic modernistic aesthetic. His devotion to black music led him to novel fusions of jazz and blues with the traditional verse in his two first books, The Weary of Blues, 1926, and Fine Clothes to the Jew, 1927. His emphasis on lower-class black life, especially in the later, led to harsh attacks on him in the black press. With these books, however, he established himself as major force of the Harlem Renaissance. In 1926, in The Nation, he provided the movement with a manifesto when he skillfully argued the need for both race pride and artistic independence. In his most memorable essay, The Negro Artist and the Racial Mountain. By this time, he was enrolled at the historically black Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, from which he would graduate in 1929. In 1927, he began one of the most important relationships of his life with his patron, Miss Charlotte Mason, or godmother, who generously supported him for 2 years. She supervised the writing of his first novel, Not Without Laughter, 1930, about a sensitive black Midwestern boy and a struggling family. However, the relationship collapsed about the last time the novel appeared. Hughes sank into a period of intense personal unhappiness and disillusionment. Now to the commercial.
Carlton Banks. That Langston Hughes is something special, but there is another very talented young African-American musician by the name of Louis Armstrong. Armstrong often stated that he was born on July 4th, 1900, a date that has been noted in many biographies. Although he died in 1971, it was not until the mid-1980s that his true birthday of August 4th, 1901 was discovered through examination of baptismal records. Armstrong was born in a very poor family in New Orleans, Louisiana. The grandson of slaves, he spent his youth in poverty in a rough neighborhood of uptown New Orleans known as the back of the town. As his father, William Armstrong, abandoned the family when Louis was an infant and took up another woman, his mother, Mary Mahan Albert, then left Louis and his younger sister, Beatrice Armstrong Collins, in the care of his grandmother, Josephine Armstrong. And at the time, his uncle Isaac, at 5, he moved back to live with his mother and her relatives and saw his father only in parades. He attended the Fisk School for Boys, where he likely had early exposure to music. He brought in some money as a paperboy and also by finding discarded food and selling it to restaurants. But it was not enough to keep his mother from prostitution. He hung out in dance halls close to home, where he observed everything from licious dancing to the quadrille. For extra money, he also hauled coal to Storyville, the famed red light district, and listened to the bands playing in the casinos and dance hall, especially Pete Lala, where Joe King Oliver performed and other famous musicians would drop into jam. After dropping out the Fisk School at age 11, Armstrong joined the quartet of boys who sang in the streets for money, but he also started to get in trouble. Cornet player Bunk Johnson said he taught Armstrong to play by ear at Dago's Tony's Tongue in New Orleans. Although his later years at Armstrong gave the credit to Oliver Armstrong, hardly looking back at his youth as the worst time, but instead drew inspiration from it. Every time I close my eyes, blowing that trumpet of mine, I look right in the heart of the good old New Orleans. It has given me something to live for. He also worked for a Lithuanian Jewish immigrant family, the Karnofskis, who had a junk hauling business and gave him a job. They took him and treated him as almost a family member, knowing he lived without a father, and would feed and nurture him. He later wrote a memoir of his relationship with the Karnofskis titled Louis Armstrong plus the Jewish Family in New Orleans, in the year of 1907. In it, he describes his discovery that his family was also subject of discrimination by other white folks, nationalities who felt that they were better than the Jewish race. I was only 7 years old, but I could easily see the ungodly treatment that the white folks were handing the poor Jewish family I worked in for Armstrong. Armstrong wore a Star of David pendant for the rest of his life and wrote about what he learned from them, how to live real life and determination. The influence of Karnofskis is remembered in New Orleans by the Karnofsky Project, a non-profit organization dedicated to accepting donated musical instruments to put them in the hands of an eager child who could not otherwise take part in a wonderful learning experience.
Hello, I am Chris Anderson, here with Bucky Fairchild, the owner of the Cotton Club. Hello.
Hello, Chris.
What did you use the Cotton Club for?
A poetry library that even a big cheese would go to Harlem and explore African American culture.
I bet it is. When did you open the club?
It opened in 1923.
Did it?
Yes.
Was the club available to all races or just white people?
It was owned by whites. There was black performers, and it was open to all the races.
That is all. Carlton Banks.
Hello, Harlem. I can't do it because
Hello. Welcome to the HTB, also known as the Harlem Television Broadcast. I am John Madden, your lead anchor. And to my left, my co-anchor. God damn it, he's in the back.
In 1922, abandoned the family when Louise was an infant. Louis. You put Louise. What the You put Louise. You
God.
Hello, Bucky.
Hey, Chris. What's your name?
Okay. You gonna say it like that?
What was your name?
I'm talking loud as
Wait, what was your name?
Hey, Chris.
What was your name?
My name's Chris Anderson.
Oh, it's Chris. Sorry, that was
Wait, cut.